today, this week is Suicide Prevention Week. And so this really touches deeply in my heart. I had a boyfriend who committed, quote unquote, committed suicide when I was 25. And it was incredibly disturbing to me that they said that he committed suicide when clearly that's not what was happening. And I don't know how to do this swiping thing. What does this mean? Okay, I'm not going to worry about it. So one of the things that I discovered, and I was about a year sober so it was like, I can tell you the exact day actually. It was Thanksgiving of 1994? Yeah, it was Thanksgiving in 1994, and I was about 9 months sober, 10 months sober when this happened. And this was the first time I had felt any love or any sort of true heart connection with someone. And so for me, that was super jarring and just ripped my heart out, obviously. And for me, it was such a dramatic experience that I really chose not to commit suicide. Having experienced the effect of what happened to him, because we were so connected, I can just share with you what happened. So I was working as a cocktail waitress in a strip club back then, and I had a lot of friends that were there that night, and I had gone away for Thanksgiving with my dad and his partner, and right before I left, he had called me on the phone, and at that time we didn't have cell phones, so it was my landline, and he called me and said, "You're the only voice of reason I have." And I told him that I loved him and that he needed to stay close to Mona. You know him, Teddy Sassoon. He was my partner back when I first got sober. You might remember him. So thank you for being here. This is a really heavy subject for a lot of people. And more so than ever before, we're seeing tremendous amounts of suicide. And there's actually suicide, there's a suicide pack or game on the internet. I mean, it is out of control. And I believe it's part of a forced depopulation agenda. And so for me, I need to talk about this because my partner, the only person it took me 12 years to get into a relationship after my partner committed suicide. So for me, it's like, whoa, it's such a huge part of my experience. And at the time I was sober, and so there were other people a lot of people actually in the program who committed suicide and who died from drug overdoses. And so for me, it was just all around me all the time, and I didn't really know how to handle it very well, but I learned to just live with it, and it was just part of my experience. It was part of my experience, like on a daily basis, hearing about people dying and committing, suicide and having ODing, and I was in the program I'm still sober. I'm 23 years sober, and I was in the rooms of AA in Los Angeles for 15 years before I moved away from Los Angeles. And so for me, I experienced a lot of death during that time, those 15 years in LA program. And it was just part of life, you know, and I got to witness all the transitions that happened with suicide, and that happened with ODs, and that happened with death in specific. So for me, it's like I have this really heavy duty understanding of the transitions from life to death, and from one state of consciousness to another, and that shift in consciousness, and what is possible and what can happen. And so for me, I find it very, very important to talk about this. Because right now we're seeing, this year specifically, we've seen a tremendous amount of people taking their own life, and people leaving the planet, and people dropping off and dying. And we honestly, as a culture, as a society, do not have enough people present and available for death doulaship. To me, that's such a crucial element to our existence right now, because people are dying, and there is a lot of shift and transition happening. So what I want to talk about specifically, though, is when this comes up in our own lives, and how we can go about really shifting that perception that that's our only way out. Because it's not. And in fact, I don't know if I want to say this, but karmically speaking, we fuck ourselves if we do that. So there are lots of ramifications for taking our own life. It's been seen, it's been witnessed, it's been talked about, it's been reported on. I've over the years, I've just experienced an incredible amount of information on this level because of my own experience of having my partner commit suicide. And my partner was electrocuted. So the way that it happened, basically, there's still a few of us that suspect that he was murdered. But so basically what they said is that he tripped on a lamp cord and fell and bit into the lamp cord and was electrocuted. Doesn't make any sense. Nobody's ever figured out exactly what happened. His door was open. He was in his apartment. And it just didn't make any sense. And so all of us were sort of just beside ourselves, trying to figure out what happened. And there was this particular person in his life who, to me, was one of the first times I ever saw a demon hosted in a body. Like, it was so obvious. And she pranced around the funeral as if she was proud of her connection to him. And my experience in knowing what it is that he had experienced with her, when I saw her for the first time at the funeral, I was just blown away at her behavior, and also just the way that she was taking credit for being in a relationship with him when they hadn't been together in over a year, because I was with him for about 8 months, right? So for me, it was like, whoa, you know, and everybody really honored me, which was beautiful, you know, and I was crying, and the father brought me, he was Jewish, so the father brought me the shovel and asked me to put 3 shovelfuls of dirt into the grave. And that showed me that they could see the authenticity of me as a human being, and that I had been with him, and that I was his true partner at that time. And that he ignored this woman. He wouldn't even talk to her. And it was really obvious, you know, but she continued to take credit for this relationship that they didn't have. And she had literally abandoned him in Monaco or Morocco, I can't remember, or Morocco, I believe, and he was left there, and it was just a bad scene. So long story short, him and I had this beautiful love that was just budding, and it was so tremendous and beautiful. And he proceeded to stay with me after he passed, and he would watch me sleep, and I could feel him, and things like that were happening in my reality. And it was really, my first experience of a ghost being in my reality all the time, and someone who I cared about and loved, and I recognized the energetic signature of this person. And so, yeah, it was so profound. He came through a psychic reading too, months later, and said that he wouldn't leave until he knew that I was okay. And he came through many people and spoke to me. It was a really profound experience for me. And so for me, the topic of suicide is something that is on my mind quite a bit when I witness it in our collective, and when I see people taking their own lives into their own hands. For me, I don't really know if he committed suicide. What I would like to say happened is he was suicided, okay? And I use that term very seriously, because the interdimensional beings that move through the collective work with in training thought forms within our minds to get us to think certain things and to get us to do certain things that we would never normally do, and is unnatural, right? Our natural state of being is well-being, is bliss, plain and simple. And so anything outside of that, we have to really question and start to observe our thought forms and really look at what's happening, and pay attention to our thought forms, and to be willing to address those thought forms and ask if they are even authentically ours, right? So that's kind of a huge deal, because most people don't question the thought forms that are coming into their mind. And so there's all these mass thought forms coming through the collective meme of experiencing the collective consciousness that might not even be ours. And so we're feeling all these free-floating anxieties, and we're feeling all this stuff, and it's like the solar storms are hitting, and it's like making us super sensitive, and we're getting triggered, and all of that's going on. And then we're having these thought forms of like, is it worth it to go on? Why am I here? Like, what the fuck am I here for? Am I doing any good? I might as well just fucking check out. So, excuse my French, but that's how, it gets to that point where we're like, there's no point in being here. But here's the thing. What's so important to remember is some of those thoughts aren't actually ours, and that they're coming from other dimensional realities and programs that are being programmed into the collective through smart meters, for example, through targeting, for example. So when I hit great depths of sadness, okay, and despair, which doesn't happen to me very often anymore, and I'm super grateful for that, because I can now recognize and discern what's mine and what's not mine. But when I feel authentic sadness, and I know that it's my sadness, it's usually amplified by the collective thought forms that are present and the energy that's operating and moving through the collective, right? So we're all being triggered emotionally by the mass consciousness fields of Earth, right? On the surface of the Earth. If you go up a certain, a certain level outside of that consciousness field, you actually feel it lift. And there's certain places, that's why people go hiking way up into the mountains, because they can experience a freedom from the consciousness fields. So, and also when you're in the airplanes, sometimes it's so peaceful. You're like, why is it so peaceful? We're flying in the air. Because we're not in the collective mass consciousness fields, and we have the opportunity to take a break from that. So so I just really want to speak to the thought forms that happen with suicide, because we can help people. We can help people understand where they're going in their minds, and that it's not necessarily theirs, and we can bring clarity. And we can bring clarity to the point where we allow them to have their experience and to be in their emotions, but it doesn't have to debilitate them, and it doesn't have to kill them, right? And because we as a collective are not supporting each other to the degree that we really could. And this, if anyone's feeling suicidal, dude, let's check it out. Let's be like, what's going on? Like, let's get in there and find out what thought forms are creating that in that person, because that's just not natural. Just not natural. And so for me, I get riled up just thinking about how many people are taking their own lives. Because it's not necessary. And we as a collective are moving through this. We're not moving out of this. We're moving through. This is not a breakdown. This is a breakthrough. So for me, it's like, okay, where are we going? We have a clean slate here. We have an opportunity to really create our lives again in a way that serves the highest good of every single being on this planet. And it's like, it had to come to this level, and we're not even there yet, quite honestly, quite frankly, we're not even there yet. But it has to, this stuff has to happen for people to wake up. I mean, because so many people spend their lives on autopilot. They're numb, you know. And when my partner died, I wasn't numb. I was newly sober. I was in the first year of my sobriety, and I was fucking raw, dude. And I was like so raw that when I was cocktail waitressing in the strip club that night, I literally was walking, like, so imagine I'm holding a cocktail tray full of drinks, and I'm walking, and all of a sudden I get an electrical shock through my entire body, and I'm like, and I fall forward, and I catch the tray, and then I brought it back, and I set it down, and I ran to the bathroom, and I was hyperventilating, and I realized that something had happened to him, and I could just feel him so completely in that moment. We were so connected. Our souls were so intertwined at that moment in time that I felt him be electrocuted. Everything is energy. And so for me, it's so important to remember that, like, when you are that connected to someone, you are going to feel everything that happens to that person. So why wouldn't that be true of the collective, right? If we can feel one person, we can feel everyone. And granted, a lot of us do. A lot of us are empaths. A lot of us can feel everything that's going on around us. And yeah. Last night I was at Ecstatic Dance, and I was dancing, and there was this wonderful DJ, and all of a sudden there was a sigil on my arm, and I was like, what the fuck, dude? Like, but what I noticed is what the sigil was, and the sigil was the semicolon. And the semicolon is that suicide thing of pause, wait, you know. And I knew exactly where it came from in the room. And I knew that it was something that this individual had struggled with super hard. And I could see it in the energy field of this person. And so I decided to release that sigil up to spirit. And then I called in that person's higher self to pour down the divine light of that person into their bodies, if it was in the highest good of that person to experience that. And I immediately saw a shift in this person, and the light literally came on in this person, and I saw it go bing. And I was like, oh, and I felt so relieved because I could tell that this person was desperate for a connection with people. And it filled a space within that person that they were desperately seeking and searching for. And it was their own energy. It had nothing to do with me. It was their own energy, right? So I just called upon their own energy to fill them, with their own source light energy. So for me, if I ever feel cut off from source light energy, I know something's wrong. I'm just like, whoa, wait, what's going on? Wait, what's happening? Check in. If I'm feeling disconnected from source, I feel like I'm starting to die. It's like super intense for me, So I'm super charged today because I feel so passionately that we don't have to take our own lives. That it's not even in right relations on any level. Oh my God, it just started pouring rain right as I said that. Love it when nature responds. Okay, so the focus being that I just want to mention these things, and they're going to sound out there. But I'm out there. So take it or leave it. Take what you want, leave the rest. There's what's called a term suicided. And that term refers to people that are being targeted. And targeted individuals are either being targeted by, there's many ways that people can be targeted. But, the usual targeters are military, government, interdimensional beings, specifically the L word. So there's many ways that someone can be targeted, and they all work together, by the way, those, theys, whatever. And so for me, it's not an us and them situation. For me, it's like, what is calling itself into existence here? What is the awareness that I need to have around this situation of this implemented thought form that is trying to distract me or derail me or bring me into a trigger, to bring me into PTSD or into despair, right? Because those are not natural states for us to be in. And so we have to discern what it is that is attempting to throw us off, because when we're in our center, nothing can really get us, honestly. And it's the shadow element, quite frankly. It's not that it has to be the government or, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we know that this exists, and we know that we're in a space of duality and polarity consciousness within the collective of humanity at this time, on Earth and on the surface of Earth. So in this expression of physicality, we have these polar opposites happening. And so it's showing up right now really intensely in the fire element and the water elements clashing with each other through the space weather and the hurricanes and the floods and the fires and the earthquakes. And so it's concentrating on the balance of those elements and bringing those masculine and feminine, or whatever we want to call it, chaos and order, bringing those elements back into balance. So the universe is always seeking to balance the charges, right? And those charges are, what I believe those charges are these places within existence that have either held on to, have contracted and held something in place to then be released later. So for safety, like a soul aspect of a person. And so there's a soul retrieval that happens. That's one example. Another example would be there's a charge in the land and it shows itself through earthquakes. or there's a charge that comes from space, right? Let's say a solar flare comes and hits the Earth, hits the magnetosphere of Earth, and there's a physical reaction reacting to that energy that's coming towards the planet. And this can also be cosmic energy that can hit the planet, that causes whatever shadow elements within us to boil up to the surface, and then they need to be released. And so a lot of the cosmic light that's getting poured onto the planet right now, above and beyond the solar storms, is causing an upheaval, if you will, an emotional upheaval within us. And it's requiring us to pay attention. And so we are being asked to look at things that we have left aside, or that we haven't dealt with, or that we choose not to deal with. And so those elements, those shadow elements that are buried deep within our subconscious mind, or we've pushed them to the side to ignore them or just not deal with them because we got to work and we got to survive and whatever, blah, 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 survival consciousness, those are coming up, and they're coming up to be addressed. So rather than going into despair or suicide, when that thought form comes up, there's something else. There's something else going on there, and we got to get to what that is, and we got to address it, and we got to honor it, and we've got to listen, right? We need to listen to people. They need to be heard, and most people have kept their inner voice silent, and now they're getting to the point where they're like, fuck this, I'm going to say what's on my mind. I'm going to say exactly how I feel. And it's good, because what it's doing is it's bringing out all the information that is needed right now for people to address, and for other people to understand what's going on. And then also because at the end of the day, if we haven't expressed ourselves, chances are we're going to have regrets about that. If there is an end to the day, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen, to be quite honest. There's no real possible awareness and understanding of what the future, quote unquote, holds at this moment in time. We only have the now moment, honestly. And from this place is where we create the next ring in the spiral, So it's like we have an opportunity at this moment in time to honor our innermost feelings, to honor and listen to what's boiling up inside of us that needs to be addressed, right? And to honor those feelings in our heart, and the sadness and the anger and the frustration and the fire. It's literally firing up in us, and it's boiling up to the surface for a reason. It's not time to take our lives. It is time to take action. It is time to listen. It is time to be fully present and fully available for our inner child, and to ask her or him what she or he needs to say, and listen, and really fucking listen, and honor that they have feelings and they haven't been necessarily honored, and forgiving ourselves. So the next step then becomes self-forgiveness, right? And self-forgiveness is crucial in this process. And there's grieving that happens with this process, and allowing ourselves to really grieve. And there's a book, actually a handbook called the Grief Recovery Handbook, that really helped me tremendously back in my, I don't know when it was about 15 years ago now, maybe, I don't know, a while back, where I came to the realization that I had been grieving my whole life, and that I was just literally regurgitating the same triggers over and over and over again because I hadn't listened to myself. I hadn't allowed for myself to express the truth of what I was feeling. And I had been doing inner child work. There's a really amazing exercise called the right hand, left hand writing exercise, or it's the dominant and non-dominant hand exercise. It's probably in the inner child work stuff. I'm not really sure, but I was taught by one of my sponsors in AA about that a long time ago, like when I first got sober. And I've been using that since I was in my first year of sobriety. So for the last 23 years, I've been using this inner child exercise to really listen to my inner child and to get to know her and to listen to her and ask her questions and see where she's at and make sure she feels safe. Because at the end of the day, again, that's not the right statement, but feeling safe, emotionally safe, and physically safe are two priorities, actually. Feeling safe is a priority, and energetically safe especially is a priority. So when someone doesn't feel safe, you can tell when someone doesn't feel safe. They're protecting themselves, they're shut down, they're closed, either that or they're super angry and they're fighting, and they have this like rah going on because they're defending themselves. And usually that's in response to an attack, a verbal attack from someone else or something like that. But you can really tell when someone doesn't feel safe. And so, being willing to actually just check in with that person and say, hey, you all right? How you doing? Super simple, full respect, we can make a difference in someone else's life. I've worked with a lot of suicidal people over the years. And including myself. I've worked with myself. And one other thing I want to say about the suicide thing that is a self-tool that I have created for myself is that statement of well-being. So my natural state of well-being is bliss. So in that moment where I'm feeling like I'm hearing a thought form of like, go in the kitchen and like get a knife, it's like, what the fuck, dude? That's not my thought. Plain and simple. And years and years and years ago, I experienced a lot of those where I was like living with someone who was suicidal. And I realized, because when that person was away at work or whatever, and I happened to be there, and these thought forms would come over me, and I was like, what the fuck is going on, And and so I would like get in the shower and just like sit there under the water and just be like, no, I'm alive. No. Like literally fighting and battling these thought forms until I realized that they weren't thought forms of my own, which is what I came to discover. They were actually from an entity or another being that was interdimensional that was trying to get me to commit suicide. And so, and it was because I was around someone who was an alcoholic, who's a drug addict, and things like that. So, and I was sober at the time. Thank God I was sober when a lot of these weird things were happening. But it was like I was able to recognize that it wasn't my thought form. So that's the key. That's the key of what I want to talk about. We are in Suicide Prevention Week. We can prevent this. This is not something we should be dealing with on the earth. It's ridiculous, quite frankly, but it does happen, and I'm honoring and recognizing and speaking to it because I feel like it's important. And it's so important because I know and have witnessed my own level of my own suicidal thought forms, but also having people in my life take their own lives. And most recently, a couple of months ago, I had to go back to the U.S. For my father's funeral. And during that time, while I was waiting for the memorial, another person as well that I had a heartfelt connection with, that I communicated with on the regular, took her own life. And for me, she was a leader in the in our community, and she had had a lot of battles and struggles with suicidal thought forms, and she had stated that she would never take her own life. And so I believe that something happened that was beyond her control. This is just my own personal belief, but I do believe that she was suicided rather than taking her own life. And so for me, she came to me, of course, after she passed, and she was with me a lot. And I honored her, and I did everything I could to speak to it at the time. And I had to ask her for space because she was sort of clinging on to me a little bit, and it felt very uncomfortable for me. And I helped her process, from the other side. And then she left. And I've been able to do that with a lot of spirits. And because I believe it's just a doorway, and so for me, it is vital to understand that our spirit doesn't die, So if we do decide to take our own life, we keep going, we keep living, It's not like we end. It is clear to me that we don't end. And in my own exit points and my own experiences of death, I know that's true. So having said that, I feel there's a need for support through the transition process. And I do know there's a woman who does death doula training. I don't know if that's what it's called. But anyone who feels called to support in that way, I feel it's very important, because I do believe that we are going to go through a process of depopulation. I don't know how much, but I do believe that, with what's happening in the manipulated events and the space weather and whatever's happening, we're going through a massive change. Never seen before in history on this planet. And so, it's so important for us to deal with the soulship, this SOULSHIP, the brotherhood and sisterhood of the soulship that is present on this planet, to honor the animals too, to honor all the souls that are transitioning or that are stuck. And so we can do our part to support people that are still alive with moving out of those thought forms and moving into life and the desire to live. I don't have suicidal thought forms anymore. I'm so grateful for that. It's been years since I've had anything like that come up, because I'm very, very discerning with my energy body, with my energy field. And when something comes even close to me, I'm aware of it, and I'm like, out. You're not welcome here, right? And bless you, I release you with love and light. It's like, I don't have time for that. I just don't. There's so much life to live, and there's no reason for me to walk through that window right now or ever, for quite frankly. So I am choosing life, and I am choosing to be here right now. And I invite you to stay fully present in the moment, to experience life and to feel it, and to allow yourself to feel it and not resist it or push it away, you know. But honor the feelings that are coming up for you, and to allow that stuff to pass through you rather than stick. Allow yourself to move through the emotions and to move through the thought forms rather than getting hooked into these thought forms that actually do not serve your highest good. And then think about all the people in your life and the love that you feel for them, and find that place within you, in your heart, where you know the truth of who you are, and step into that. And remember that you come from source. As an organic human, you have source light energy available to you in every moment. And clear out anything that is not that, and get connected, reconnected to your source light energy, and allow that to be the prime directive and your vertical alignment. So I'd just like to say a prayer for all the people on the planet right now and the souls and the disembodied energies and souls that are present around us at this time, that are suffering from illusions and from pain and from loss and sadness. And I just ask the elemental spirits of earth and the angelic realms, or the celestial realms, the benevolent beings, to gently remind these people, whoever they are, wherever they are, whatever pain they're in, remind them of who they are in their heart, in their source, and where they come from, and that they are not separate in any way from this source light energy. That they are truly an emanation of spirit, of the one heart that pumps, the one heart that beats, and the one mind of all that is, the one life. Allowing ourselves to feel the peace of that. Knowing that this is true for all of us. And we can have this in any moment. We release this word into the law, knowing that it is already done. Simply allow it to be. And so it is. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for being here with me. I'm deeply grateful for your presence, and I invite you to continue the prayer this week. Wow. There's so much going on, and anything we can do to help those that have lost their homes and their lives, and the families, and the children, and the animals, and the land, the earth, and all the light that is flooding out, all the trees that have burnt down. It's all like this raw, jagged, raw, open sore for the earth. And so we might want to concentrate just on sealing that up with rainbow light and bringing peace to those areas where there have been fires and floods, and bringing balance. If you haven't watched my Balancing the Elements of Earth video, I do a prayer for that specifically. So thank you so much for being here. And we just simply ask all these energies to return back to source. They are not necessary in our experience. We release you with love and light. We trust that you're on your own journey and that you don't need us to embody that for you. You can find your way back to source. So thank you again for showing us who you are in this moment so that we can witness that energy and release it. So thank you for being with me. I love you all, and I'm grateful that I can speak today. I'm grateful that I have the wherewithal to show up for my life today. Albeit it is difficult every day for me to show up for my life. But I'm well privileged in comparison to others. So I feel grateful for what I have, and that I have a spirit that never stops, that continues to search and ask questions, and doesn't settle for thought forms that don't serve the highest good. So I can just continue to ask questions and show up. Just keep showing up. Thank you. Have a beautiful day, beautiful evening, and beautiful morning wherever you are.